Hello everyone, my name is Cindy. Today I will begin my presentation, I Got So I Could Take His Name, by Emily Dickinson. First I will go through the outline and structure of my presentation. I'll go through the introduction, a prosaic reading of the form, then its language feature and vocabulary, poetic structure and rhymes, figures of speech, and last conclusion. The first part of my presentation is the introduction. The title of this poem, I Got So I Could Take His Name, is taken from the first line of the poem. It is a very typical Emily Dickinson poem. The author wrote his poem and published it between 1830 and 1886. The situation is a hymn written after the departure of a loved one. The form of this poem is a 27-line poem. It has 6 stanzas, iambic because I got, and it's a quatrain. In the first 5 stanzas, there are irregular rhymes and is a free verse. The theme of this poem is death and religious belief. The speaker of this poem could be Emily and could be not. It's a first-person narrative that mirrors someone who lost a love. The purpose of this poem is to show grief of the departure of the loved one and to express doubt in deity. The tone of this poem is formal. It goes from heavy to dubious, showing depressed emotions. Now I will go into the language and prosaic interpretation of the poem. In the language part of the poem, there are 4 main features. The first one is unusual words and syntax, the second is omission of words, the third is dash, and the last is capitalization, the last 2 in punctuation. This poem shows a very regular omission of words starting from the title, I got something so I could take his name. After reading this poem, I believe that prior to the 4th stanza, the objective in the I got something should be something similar to faith. The main difference between the first and second half of the poem is whether the narrator has or has not faith. So instead of putting like I got courage or I got something else in here, I would rather put I got faith so I could take his name. It would be like diverting from the theme to fit in other words otherwise, even though they're grammatically correct. So instead of reading the original poem, I would read and interpret it in a prosaic way so it would be really easy to understand. Here's the prose. I got faith so I could say his name or take his name without feeling that stop sensation or terrible pain on my soul like the thunder in the room is tremendous gain. I got faith so I could walk across the floor where we used to walk, arm in arm, so where he turned, I turned, and how our sinew or heartstrings tore. I got faith so I could stare the box in which his letters grew without that forcing in my breath. The grief of his departure feels like staples driven through. I could dimly recollect a grace, I think they call it God, who is known to ease extremity or extreme situations when formula, normal remedies, has failed. And although I shaped my hands in the way of petition to pray, I was ignorant of every word that the Holy Order utters. It is my business with the cloud or with God, if any powers behind it is not yet subjected to despair, it would still care remotely for an affair as small as my misery. But she is not hopeful, as now the deity is too vast, big, or disturbing to be interrupted any more. So going back to the language features, in unusual words and syntax, there are several words worth noting. For instance, staples. The word is used in daily life more than in literature. The etymology of this word is bent pieces of metal with pointed ends in late 13th century from Old English, a general Germanic word that apparently evolved a specialized meaning in English in the 1995, which is thin wire driven through papers to hold them together, like the staples we use now. The definition could be looked at from both the denotative and connotative sides, also allusion. So denotatively in Dickinson's day, staple is like a large blacksmith forged metal fastener that could serve to hold carriage parts or large door latches together. Connotatively, this word is associated with the strong binding force and a thrusting motion. Readers are able to imagine the pain through the heavy binding nature of the word. Word association comes with metallic, cold, and unfeeling objects like iron. If we replace, if we substitute the word with hammered, it may give a dull effect. Well, it may be bruised, but there's no tears in the, yeah, like nothing would go through. And if we substitute it with pinned, it wouldn't be as forceful. So it shows how the author's effective word choice allows the readers to feel the level of her mental pain physically. It would be like a stake driven through the chest. Another word with a connotative meaning is cloud. Clouds usually connect us to higher beings, deities, or immortals. Here it is used in place of God and other deity to show their supremacy and powerful natures. Just as candy connotatively gives the feeling of sweet, Dickinson's effectiveness in language is displayed through communicating the ideas of superiorness of heavenly beings through indirectly stating clouds instead of God, which leaves the readers a great impression. So looking at the punctuation, we have to note capitalization. Giving a name by capitalizing it puts emphasis on the words as if they were important people. For example, tremendous, thunder, room, angel, sinew. So many of her caps and lower cases are in nouns, and reading through, they're tainted with strong emotions like power, misery, despair. But these do not make lowercase nouns less important. Throughout the poem, Dickinson's emotions are on a roller coaster, sometimes grievous, like tremendous, thunder, and at other times unfeeling or plain, like soul, letter, or floor, drawing her readers in. Other punctuations like dash and commas are also worth noting. Dash is typical feature of Emily Dickinson's writing. This is especially important in this poem because it corresponds to the grievous and depressive tone that this poem brings out. For instance, commas and dashes break the breaths of the readers into bits. So if you read it physically, it would be like, I got so I could take his name, without tremendous gain. That stop sensation on my soul, and thunder in the room. So breaking and pausing like that really shows there's sadness that couldn't be contained. It infiltrates into the reader's own emotions and is brought out through the pause and breaks in the breaths. So stopping at unexpected places and catching people off guard. And this also leads analysis into her poetic structure, which shows a similar effect. In terms of poetic structure, this poem is typical when the poet seems to recount an experience or tell a little anecdote in the first few sections of the poem about her experience with her loved one, which she walks around the room with him, she steers his letterbox. And then in the final stanzas of the line is a philosophical reflection on the significance of the experience, which basically shows that she does not trust the heavenly being anymore. In this case, the author begins in a conversational, confiding tone about the departure, either taken by death or simply by traveling to another place of a loved one, and her grief as she physically speaks his name, walks the steps they walk together, and reads his letters. Her physical actions transcend into a mental world when she realizes that her physical efforts to ease the pain were useless, and upon that she began to waver and doubt her belief in God. Two prominent structural features she used in order to promote the deeper philosophical meaning is enjambment and caesura. In pausing irregularly and starting abruptly, she gives her readers the awareness of something important and serious, suggesting the solemn tone of this poem. By pausing purposefully and breaking up the prose, she allows her readers to fill in the gaps and interpret beyond what is written and given in words, namely her anxiety, helplessness, and loss of faith beyond devastation and grief. Examples of enjambment and caesura could be found in the poem labeled in orange. I got so I could walk across that angel in the floor, and for a minute affair as misery. And breakings could also be found labeled in yellow in the poem. The next part is devices. So this poem basically uses a lot of major and minor devices. I categorized and selected a few that I thought would be important. Major devices include parallelism. Minor devices include simile and personification. And a more general device is contrast, which I will give after talking about the devices as in a contrast in themes. So parallelism could be identified where I got so I could take his name, I got so I could walk across, I got so I could steer the box. In questioning the I got what so I could do something, it re-emphasizes the missing objective in the sentence. And this creates a lingering effect overall, making the readers wonder repeatedly at the what in the sentence and creating suspense, which encourages them to try and find out. The structural repetition makes the poem sound more lyrical and easy to read. Minor devices like simile and personification could be identified. Similes could be identified in as staple. So basically, the narrator is stating that the feelings of her pain or her grief is like staples driven through the chest or like staples. So this vivid simile shows the level of pain felt, equivalent to the feeling of being binded by heavy binding metals, which gives a memorable effect because the pain becomes physical and the pain becomes more realistic. Another minor device is personification. It could be identified where ordination utters. Ordination is defined in the glossary, which is at the end of this presentation, but briefly, just to say, ordination could be like reason, or it could also be like something with order. And here, not only does the author like capitalizes it, giving it or like a person nature, personified nature, she also uses personification as in ordination utters. So when something like ordination utters, but the effect on the narrator is unfelt, or she doesn't hear a word, she is ignorant of any word, it actually contextualizes her grief and doubt, showing how the speaker does not wish to be confined to order. She doubts her own religions and doesn't wish to be confined to the deity anymore, symbolizing a change. And as in contrasting of the themes, I believe there's death to deity or reality versus belief, because death and departure shows the ephemeral nature of human beings, and this stands in stark contrast to the powerful, immortal heavenly beings. Given the reality of the speaker's loss of a loved one, she begins to doubt her doubt her beliefs, ending her poem with a note of irony that heavenly being itself is too vast for anyone interrupting, hinting her ultimate loss in hope and faith. In conclusion, the poem speaks the poet's reminiscence of a loved one lost either from death or desertion. The misery of the poem is evident in the punctuation and the structure in enjambment and caesura, which breaks the breath of the reader into fragments and also showing the emotion of grief, which is apparent through reading the poem, and also showing the narrator's profound pain and wavering religious faith in times of Great Depression. My presentation is finished. Thank you.